Happy Christmas, everyone, and welcome to the Christmas episode of You Can't Be What You Can't See. It's FemaleFriYay. So, because it's Christmas, I thought we'd do something a little bit different and interview one of our block boys. And when I was thinking, okay, what boy should we pick? There was only one in my mind, and it's Mr. He for She himself, Professor Edward Mariano. How are you doing this morning, Ed?
I'm fantastic. It's great to see you, Becky. It's always good to see you.
Yeah, good, and really good to see you, although I'm slightly sad that the weather in California is much better than here. So we'll kick off by saying, Ed, what's your name? Where do you originally come from? And where do you now work?
So, Edward Mariano, and my origin, what can I say? So I was born in the United States. So I was born in New Jersey, in East Orange, New Jersey. And my parents immigrated from the Philippines. So I'm considered first generation US citizen. I lived there till almost middle school, and then my family moved us out to Northern California. And I've more or less been in California since then. I took 5 years and went back to the East Coast of the US to do my medical school and my internship. And then I came back to California in 2000 for my residency in anesthesiology. And then I've been in California since then. So I still work here in California. I've only gone from Northern California to Southern California to work in San Diego and then back to Northern California. So now I've been here consistently since 2010.
Wow. Oh, well, you're there for the weather and the good wine, right?
It's
Not
hard to
just,
complain.
yeah, it's very hard to complain. So, what got you into regional anesthesia?
So I think interestingly, when I was still in my training, I actually didn't think that regional anesthesia was a career path. So I thought that regional anesthesia was just part of anesthesia. And I had, if you think about the context, I mean, this was in the early 2000s. So ultrasound was still relatively unpopular. Um, the gold standard was still peripheral nerve stimulation. There were very few places that I knew of in the world that consistently were using continuous nerve blocks. So it was really single injection, blind techniques, basically extremity blocks, very few truncal blocks compared to what we see now. And so as a resident, I felt very comfortable with a lot of the basic extremity peripheral nerve blocks. So I actually did my fellowship in pediatric anesthesia. A friend of mine convinced me to do pediatric anesthesia as my fellowship because he said, well, you like regional anesthesia and kids could use regional anesthesia. So maybe you could do some like your own little subspecialty track. And so I did. So that was actually what got me interested in pediatric anesthesia and specifically regional anesthesia and acute pain management for kids. It's a long story, but then later that really became my career as regional anesthesia for all ages, because I got my first job actually at UC San Diego because of my pediatric fellowship training, not because of my regional anesthesia experience. They were looking for someone who was pediatric fellowship trained so they could take call and take care of all the sick little babies. But at the same time, I had to do something else besides pediatrics because there wasn't enough pediatric volume. So I spent most of my clinical time taking care of adult patients and doing regional anesthesia for them. So I was asked eventually to start teaching the residents regional anesthesia. And then, here I am.
There you are, and the rest is history. So, if you weren't an anaesthetist, Ed, what do you think you would be doing with your life?
Ooh, yeah, I think that's a tricky question. I mean, I think I would probably do something in related to customer service. Just I think that I started working early as soon as I could drive myself to a job. My parents always encouraged me to work, so I started out as a dishwasher, and I moved up to bussing tables and um, serving tables, and then yeah, and so I always felt like part of the reason perhaps that I got into medicine and specifically chose anesthesia was because I think I've appreciated what the front of the house and back of the house, per se, really do in those kinds of fields. And I think a lot of times in my own career as an anesthetist, I think really reflects that. Like I think that anesthetists do so much of the hard, important work that make patients do well from surgery. We're really the ones who run the back of the house and make sure that that all of the outcomes and experiences for patients are really what they want to be. So it'd be hard for me to know what I would do outside of medicine, but I think it'd be something related to customer service. I mean, if I couldn't be an anesthetist, I'd probably still work in the hospital in some way. Maybe I'd be a patient navigator or someone who just shows lost patients how to get from place to place.
I seem to do a lot of that. And actually, no, it's weird. Everyone always stops me and go, do you know where to get to like the ECG specialist? So I'm like, no, let's go and look at the notice board together. And I guess I always just think that anesthesia is a customer service role. What's your favorite part of your job?
I mean, I think that the best part that I see, and maybe the validation, I think in being an anesthesiologist who does regional anesthesia is really that gratification from a successful block, and it's really paired, I think, with observing the benefits that patients receive. I mean, I think that's always been the best part. When I think about how impactful it was to be a pediatric anesthesiologist who was one of very few at the time, really doing nerve blocks and continuous nerve blocks for children. That was even, you can imagine, a different level because it's not just the children, it's really their families. For years, I would just have regular patients and their families. Just we'd call each other or text each other on our cell phones just to see how they're doing after recovery, because for a lot of our children who have multiple procedures, it's a very long course. And so you start to build a lot of those kinds of therapeutic relationships, I think, with families that is very unusual, I think, in anesthesia. But I think that that's really the thing that matters. And I think when I look at my regional anesthesia career, I feel like those early experiences as a pediatric anesthesiologist definitely have influenced the way that I approach regional anesthesia. And it probably makes a lot of sense now. I mean, a lot of things I talk about have to do with really making a difference outside of just that immediate period that we observe a patient in the in the theater or in the recovery room. It's really what happens later, and it's really making a difference, make a big impact in how patients and their families recover. But I think that really comes from my background and training.
Perfect. And as a passionate regional anaesthetist, I'm assuming you've got a favourite block. You can tell us about that or your favourite dinosaur, completely up to you.
Ooh, I'll tackle the dinosaur. Dinosaur is an easy one, actually. For a long time, for years, Stu the T-Rex at the Field Museum in Chicago was my favorite dinosaur. But then I started going to Chicago with my oldest son, who loves to go to Chicago with me. He's come 3 times already to Chicago with me. And the Stu the T-Rex used to have a place of honor in the main lobby of the massive Field Museum, and it was replaced a few years ago with Maximo the Titanosaur, and which was somewhat shocking, especially if you're used to seeing massive T-Rex. But now Maximo the Titanosaur, which is now my oldest son's favorite dinosaur, and now he's my favorite dinosaur.
Love
And it's
it.
really something to see. I mean, it takes up almost half the hall from head to tail. It's massive. And so I definitely recommend it. Anyone who is going to Chicago for a visit should stop by the Field Museum and see Maximo.
Perfect. Right, we're going to have a little distraction now and do our 1 minute block break. Questions completely unrelated to regional anesthesia. So, Ed, your minute starts now. What's your favourite festive food?
For sure, I would say stuffing with gravy.
Okay, and what Christmas song will you always sing along to?
Uh, Mariah Carey, All I Want for Christmas.
Okay, do you think that you're on the naughty or nice list this year?
I think I'm on the nice list, but I think
Okay, that's
it's
good.
a gray.
And what's your favorite Christmas movie?
Love Actually,
Okay, going on to less Christmas related questions. Are you a beach hut kind of guy or a cabin in the woods?
Beach Hut.
Or a morning lark or a night owl?
A morning for sure. Yeah, I start fading away at nighttime.
Okay, and are you more into Instagram or Twitter?
I like Twitter because I understand it a little bit more.
Okay, tell me something you're really bad at.
Do I have to answer that?
Uh, well, you don't have to answer that. I always, when I think of that question, think of multiple things I'm really bad at,
No, I can't nail
including
it.
running.
I can't pick one. Time management.
Okay, tell me a little bit about your career path and how you've got to where you are, really.
So I think we talked a little bit about my training already. So I'll start with just talking about I think my involvement in organized medicine, and I think that has actually been I think it's really been a lot of serendipity, great mentoring, sponsorship. I've been very fortunate, I think, to have very strong role models. Yeah, I actually attended ASRA as an attendee when I first started my new job at UC San Diego, and I think I was incredibly surprised in a good way just how welcoming ASRA was. I mean, it was the meeting itself, was much smaller than the meetings are today. I had a chance to meet president of ASRA at the time, was Rick Rosenquist, who actually has been a good mentor for me my whole career. I had a chance to meet people like Colin McCartney. I remember Colin McCartney was actually one of the first speakers, maybe the first speaker, whom I actually waited after his lecture, to ask him a question because I didn't want to ask a question in the whole big audience room. So I waited till he came off the podium and stepped out of the room so I could ask Colin McCartney a question about one of his papers. And so, and he was so kind. And I mean, many of us know Colin very well now, but he was exactly how you'd expect him to be. And I think and those kinds of experiences, I think, were big impressions. These were people whom I really admired. I'd read their work. Vincent Chan is an incredible example. I remember the first time I taught a workshop at ASRA, Vincent was president. And there was a president's reception. I remember meeting Vincent Chan for the first time. I was very intimidated, but he's like so incredibly humble and welcoming, and really made me want to be part of ASRA. Santham Suresh. We were just talking yesterday, but he was one of very few pediatric regional anesthesia experts when I was coming up in training. I mean, he's still today one of the premier pediatric regional anesthesiologists in the world. And one of my first workshops I had to teach with him, which was incredibly intimidating since I had read all of his papers. And here I was teaching. It was just the two of us as faculty teaching pediatric regional anesthesia. But even as of yesterday, I'm getting great advice from people whom I met very early in my career. And so I think that if I had to like look at my career path, I think a lot of it has to do with just putting yourself out there and being uncomfortable, feeling comfortable with that discomfort and meeting people whom you admire, because you never know. I mean, these become long-term relationships because we work so long. But because of all those experiences, I decided that I felt strongly about getting much more involved in ASRA. Many of those people introduced me to opportunities to teach within our American Society of Anesthesiologists as well. I think it's really through ASA that I started to understand the importance of advocacy. And besides all the great research and education that we do, that the practice of medicine is constantly under threat, not just in the US, but everywhere. And so I think organizations like the ASA for us in the US, or within my own state, the California Society of Anesthesiologists, that I'm currently president of, they really fight on behalf of anesthesiologists and physicians in general, just to protect the practice of medicine, to ensure that we have the environment and the support that we need to do the jobs that we've been called to do, and also ensure that we're able to take good care of patients, and hopefully keep that our specialty moving forward for the future.
So, what do you think your biggest career achievement has been in a star-studded career that you've had? Do you have one moment that's been particularly stands out, or that you were particularly proud of?
Um, I don't think so. It's probably not what people think. If I can think of one, maybe like a pivotal moment for my career. it'd probably be the time that I took my oldest son with me on a visiting professor trip. And it doesn't seem like it would be, it's not a big award. It wasn't a keynote lecture. It was a visiting professorship to Penn State and Hershey. I was hosted by Sanjeev Adhikari, who many people know because of his work in fascial plane blocks. But he had invited me to come out to Penn State, which is actually not very far from where I grew up in New Jersey. So when I was invited to go there as a visiting professor to give grand rounds and and speak with the trainees and have some one-on-one meetings with faculty, I thought about what I remember from being a kid in New Jersey. And one of the things I remembered was going to Hershey Park in Hershey, Pennsylvania, where the Penn State Medical Center is located, and just how unbelievable it was. It was like, for me as a little kid, it was like going to Disneyland. And so I asked them back after I got invited whether I could bring one of my kids with me. And they said, sure. They said, take, if you want to bring someone, many of our visiting professors bring their kids along, and they go off to the park while you do your visiting professor stuff. And I remember writing them back, and I said, well, my oldest son is only 4 years old. So he's not going into the park on his own.
Hope not.
So here I was. I went as a visiting professor with a 4-year-old, and we did everything together. He got up on East Coast time, which is a 4-hour difference for us, or 3-hour difference from California. And he got up early in the morning, before 4 in the morning, and went to grand rounds. And we did all the tour of the hospital, and we met one-on-one with faculty, or I guess 2-on-1 with faculty. We had a couple of days that we spent going to Hershey Park, and it just made me realize that it doesn't always work that way. Like sometimes, like our schedules when we go to meetings, they're too busy to do both. But there are great opportunities, and sometimes we don't really think of them as opportunities to try to be both. You can be an academic and a parent at the same time, and it just made me realize. I got a lot of feedback about it. And I realized that there is some privilege, and I think that I've reflected on this a lot. There's some privilege in being a man in this circumstance, but I think that it's also important that we try to set examples that apply to all of our colleagues. So often when I invite a visiting professor, I ask, do you want to bring one of your kids with you, or do you want to bring a family with you? Because why can't they coexist? Like that's who we are. So I think that's really changed my outlook on just how we treat each other, and what the future of academic medicine could look like.
And it's special memories. Does that mean you have 3 budding regional anesthesiologists in the Mariano household?
Who knows? Who knows?
Who knows?
I mean, I do hope, I hope that they at least see how excited I get about the things I do, and just and also all the people I interact with. They see that how much dialogue we have, and just the friendships that we have. Like when I go and visit people, and you remember the whole family came with us to Ezra.
I know. I missed them. I missed Carly and the boys. Apparently, they were all in the pool where we were sweating in the furnace that was Thessaloniki Concert Hall.
That's
My
right.
God, I don't think I'm going to forget that heat anytime
Those
soon.
air conditioning units were very popular.
They were.
They were popular for gathering places.
They were. We had the office where we just sit there and stand there, and then people would just come in and like pull up a chair just next to the aircon. No one would move. So moving on to something a bit more negative, what do you think your biggest failure's been?
I mean, I think that there have been plenty. I mean, I have a long list of failures that oftentimes I think that you never forget, but I think that are hard for people to see. So I think that when people ask me about or I'll get comments from people and say, oh, you must be really lucky, or you really I wish I was able to do the things that you're doing. I said you can. I said that success. I think about this one graphic. Sylvia Duckworth has produced this iceberg graphic. She calls it's the iceberg of success. And what you see on top is very small, and it's all the great things. And then there's the massive chunk of ice below the surface that you don't really see. And it are this lists of failures and things that didn't work out. I mean, for all the papers that I've published, there are at least 3 to 5 times more rejections that I've gotten that have led up to those eventual publications or awards. There are things that you've been nominated for and lost. It actually took me three nomination rounds, 3 years, before I became a member of the ASR board. It happened. I think that what are you going to do differently? I think it's an important question, right? I mean, if you don't put yourself out there, then you'll never know. And I think that it's helpful to really learn from those experiences. And you say, you know what, like maybe I am good enough, to put my name out there and try, right? And being interviewed for things, losing elections. I mean, I think that one of the, a very important failure moment for me, I think, was actually losing my election to the officers track of ASRA, which most people probably don't know. But that's the reason I served 5 years on the ASR board, but it's the reason I didn't move up into the officers track is because I lost an election. And it happened. And I think that being able to use those kinds of experiences and disappointments to try to open your eyes to other opportunity, I think is really, I think that's so important. I mean, I think that I wouldn't be doing the work that I do within our state level society, the CSA, or the ASA, our national organization for anesthesiologists representing 56,000 members, if I hadn't lost my ASRA election. I mean, now I think I just started as the section chair for ASA's research and educational programs. And I think that I found my path, at least in organizational medicine. But those are the things that I think that we all need. You can't win everything. And I think that that's an important perspective to have when you're looking at a long career like we do in medicine.
I think that's very wise words that resonate with a lot of people. I think it's perhaps more what you do with your failures and how you pick yourself up that's important than the fact you've actually failed in the first place. Now, you talked earlier about these role models that you've had in your career. Have you had any particularly standout lady role models in your time in medicine?
Oh, absolutely. I've had so many, and I think that it has to start first with my mom. So my mom is a psychiatrist, retired psychiatrist.
Wow.
So I was raised by a woman in medicine, and so that probably influences much of my outlook. And then I think in my career, if I look at my anesthesia career, especially in training, it was really important, I think, to have incredibly strong women in anesthesia who gave me guidance. So as a pediatric anesthesiologist, my fellowship director was Chandra Ramamurthy, who's the pediatric cardiac anesthesiologist and really one of the pioneers in that area of specialty. And I think that observing firsthand, I worked with her very closely during that year and during the end of my residency because I ended up doing 5 months of pediatric cardiac anesthesia, which probably most people, I would never be in that operating room again. That was plenty. But seeing how Chandra would interact with these pediatric cardiac surgeons, who, as you can imagine, are not always easy to deal with, was really impressive. And I think that it taught me a lot about communication and negotiations and advocating for patients. Gail Bolt's another one who's currently the head of pediatric cardiac anesthesia at Stanford, who was one of my attendings when I was a fellow. And then coming up in regional anesthesia, there's so many. I think that in regional anesthesia, I've had Kaiser Enneking and Terry Horlocker and Denise Waddell. These are really like powerhouses in regional anesthesia. Sue Ganapathy, who many in regional anesthesia, especially who joined ASRA when I did, will be very familiar with just how incredibly warm and also just how incredibly brilliant Sue Ganapathy is and just how much influence she's had on people's careers. And then in our national society, I think I've had so many strong women leaders in anesthesia who have been strong advocates for the specialty. Linda Mason, who's a past president of both the California Society and the American Society of Anesthesiologists. Actually, I've had the opportunity to select and the privilege of selecting our honorary lecturer for our annual meeting for the California Society of Anesthesiologists this April. And it's Dr. Mason, who's really always been one of my idols and one of my biggest supporters in my career. And then past presidents of the ASA, who I think have been just so incredibly influential, really, especially during COVID. I mean, Mary Dale Peterson, I think, is an incredible example. We serve together now on the ASA's delegation to the American Medical Association. But you see that kind of leadership, Beverly Phillip, who, you have these incredibly influential people who have led the largest organized anesthesia society in the US. And they've made so much time for me when I have questions about things and just need good advice. So I've been the beneficiary of, as I said, a lot of great mentors and sponsors. And so, I think I feel very obligated to try to turn it around.
Lots of inspiring women there. What inspired you to champion diversity?
I think part of it, I think, is just being observant. I think that as we start to get more involved, I think, in our careers, you start to join practices locally within your hospital. I think I've always paid attention. I'm a big observer. I like to see how things work. Who does what. Who the even before social media, like who the influencers are within circles, because I think that's important to understanding how to make change if that's really what you're after. And I think that as I've gotten involved locally and on a broader scale in leadership, it's very normal for me to be the only person who looks like me in a room. And I also, it makes you also observe who else isn't in the room. And I think that those kinds of things, I think, are really important. We can't be numb to the lack of diversity. We have to see it, and then we also have to do something about it. And I think that something I think about often when I'm physically in a room is that it's really a symbol. Once you get in the room, hold the door open for someone else, right? Make some room. Figure out who else is missing, and try to think about others who would really be an important voice, perspective, because I do think that as we know from all of the published literature about diversity in companies, that diverse boards produce successful companies. They allow diversity of thought and perspectives that I think can be really critical, especially when you're looking at trying to increase your market share or influence as an organization.
What advice would you give to someone starting out in their regional anesthetic career?
So I think so maybe my advice is runs a little counter perhaps to what a lot of people say. I think that I see a lot of advice on social media and hear people speak about you need to say no to everything. I'm very skeptical about that advice because, to be honest, I think being someone who can say no now, I think you have to be in a position of success to be able to have the luxury of saying no. I think early in your career, I would say you should really think about how you can say yes. And that doesn't mean say yes to everything, but I think that the key criteria for me are when I'm considering opportunity or if I'm giving advice to mentees is, is this something that I'm really passionate about? That's one very good reason to say yes. But another reason is this something that can help me build a relationship or teach me something new that I don't know? And those two things aren't always the same, right? It may not be something you're so interested in, but maybe it'll help you build a relationship. I think that that's an important factor to consider when you're thinking about opportunities. So I think you have to be open to opportunity. I would definitely advise people to not automatically say no, because you never know. I mean, and I can tell you firsthand that I found in my life experience and career that had I said no to some things that probably weren't obviously interesting or in my area of research or clinical interest, I probably wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today. I mean, I think that so much of, I think mentorship is really the relationship. It's really the long-term trajectory. And that's kind of the way I think about things. And
I
so,
love
yeah,
it. Be a
yeah, try
yes
to be open.
man.
Try to be
Yeah,
open.
try and be a yes man. And finally, Ed, my last question. Can you tell us something about yourself that we wouldn't know?
I think that I'm pretty open, so I think that there are probably, I think most people know more about me than they actually want to know. I mean, if I had to think of something, so so one thing that people probably don't know, or at least not everyone knows, is that, yeah, I'm a big discount shopper.
Are
So
you a couponer? Do you collect
I
the
love,
coupons?
no, but I'm a big sales shopper. So that we have like, if I actually like shopping, which is probably not surprising, but almost everything that, like when you see me at a meeting or conference, almost everything I've gotten that's either like like a discount store, like here in the US, we have outlets, and we have like, or we have
Love it.
discount stores like Marshall's or like Nordstrom Rack or something that, I'm a big believer that you can find everything you like, and not pay full price for it. So
I love a good bargain.
I do. It's like finding buried treasure. So
Yes,
I'm a
it
big
is,
believer in it, right?
definitely.
So that
I'm
it's
with
not
you
only
on that
did you
one.
find something that you like, but you also saved a bunch of
I
money.
never
So,
pay full price for anything.
also important for the holiday season. So
Yes,
just as
indeed. Ed, you have been absolutely wonderful. I feel really privileged today that I feel that I've interviewed regional anaesthetic royalty. I hope that you have a wonderful Christmas at home with the Marianos and you have loads of good food and good times and good wine. Thank you so much for coming.
it's my pleasure. And happy Christmas and happy New Year to you, Becky.
Yeah, you too. Bye.
Bye.